Welcome to Slingshot25 Shotcast, a series of bite-sized podcasts that'll feel like an espresso shot to your brain. I'm Courtney.
And I'm Jackie.
And something we've been thinking about, actually talking about a lot, is the theory of complexity. Turns out that in almost every class we teach, we end up teaching the theory of complexity. And we're like, well, maybe we should just tell everyone about it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I wish we had some sort of way we could just talk to people and release it on the internet.
Ooh, well, if only.
So, theory of complexity, you're right, Courtney. I find myself in almost every class I do, whether I'm talking about leadership, tough conversations,
Change management,
any of those. I end up sort of trotting out this theory of complexity, which we did not invent. I'm going to start with what is the big, giant takeaway from the theory of complexity, which sounds like something very mathematical. Like that should appear in some sort of fancy calculus course or something. But why we end up talking about it in people courses is because it teaches us a really important lesson about what it means to interact with people. The theory of complexity is a basic 4-box model. It says there's 4 general levels of complexity in the world. Everything that happens in this world can fall into one of these categories. One of those categories is simple. We don't end up talking a lot about simple when we're talking about people, but most of your day is actually surrounded by just very simple things. You don't have a lot of complexity that you have to swim through every single day that is sort of lost on you.
Yeah, your routine.
That's right, your routine.
All the things you don't have to think about.
Precisely. So we don't talk about that too much. We end up talking about 2 boxes in the 4-box because they tend to get conflated and confused. One is what we call complicated. Complicated is all the really hard math stuff. And I usually describe that as complicated is the stuff that puts a person on the moon. It's what NASA will used in 1969 to put a person on the moon and probably will use again to put a person on the moon again. And I believe 2025 they're aiming for. So it's just about things that can be figured out, even if they're really hard. But there is an answer. That's complicated stuff.
Physics, gravity, economics, balancing your checkbook, right? There's a right answer and there's a formula.
That's right. So we introduce that to people. And usually the people that we're talking to in these classes, their jobs are primarily, in a field of complicated. Maybe they're engineers, or maybe they are in logistics, or things that take figuring it out and there is an answer. But then there is another box in this theory of complexity called, complex. And that, we reveal to our participants, is where all human beings are. And
there is no direct correlation between cause and effect in human beings, right?
That's right.
There's no law of gravity. People will respond how they respond.
That's right. People will recognize that we all have free will. And so there's no consistent correlation. You're right. When we think we figured something out, it will change again, and it will change again. And so one of the things that we teach right away, especially when we're in leadership classes or teaching about how to help people through change, is to just embrace the complexity of it. Don't try to solve for it. There's no single answer. There are things that you can do that are better or worse, and that largely lies in how you think about the situation, not necessarily your techniques. Technique comes from thinking about things differently. And so we encourage people to understand that they're actually sitting across the table or, on the other end of an interaction with a human being that is not figure-outable, so stop trying to do it.
Yes, and we end up getting a lot of even requests sometimes for things like checklists, or what do I do in this scenario, or what's the shortcut, or what's the answer. And that is complicated thinking, right? What's the problem here? How do I solve it? And I want to solve it the same way every time for every person. In a complex environment, when you're dealing with human beings, the math is sense and respond. Mm-hmm. And the sensing is going to depend on the person's experience, their feelings, their emotions at the moment, right? What you sense at 9 a.m. from someone might be very different by 3 o'clock, depending on what happened in their day. You sense and respond. And so the answer is always it depends. Mm-hmm. It's always it depends. And good leaders are good at sensing and responding. And they skip over the trap of thinking like, oh, if you just tell me exactly what to say.
Yeah.
When this person feels this way. It doesn't work like that. Humans don't work like that.
Because humans have something unique from every other system that you deal with, whether you're dealing with mechanical systems or chemical systems or software systems. The one thing that human systems essentially have different from all of those other kinds of systems is feelings, is emotions. Those are not present. So far, they're not present in AI. I don't know. Like, I never want to say never now. But right now, human beings are the only thing that have emotions. And emotions are actually what drives those interactions. There's typically very little data or real facts involved in most conversations. Conversations between people are rooted, and pay attention to this in your conversations. Maybe this is a challenge to all of you. Pay attention to how much of your conversations are actually more wrapped around how you feel than any true data or facts. Even the conversations you have at work that are actually, involve some data and some facts, but pay attention to how much of it's actually based on how you feel about a situation.
All right. Well, that's all we have for this episode. If you want to learn more about the theory of complexity, seriously, Google it. We could talk about it for much longer. But that's what we have today, and we always have more to say. If you want more, drop us a line at slingshot25.com. Until next time.